everyone. Welcome back to the seventh episode of the Music Mind Lab. Today, I'm joined by Amanda Wu, who is an absolutely amazing violist, and I'm so lucky to have her here with me today. Amanda, how about you introduce yourself a little bit to us? So, how did you start playing the viola, and when did you start?
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm currently a university student, so I'm a sophomore at Yale, and I've been playing viola for over a decade now, so I actually started back in third grade. The reason I started is I used to be a piano student, like a lot of people, I think. I never really liked piano because it was a lot of individual practice, and I didn't really like just being by myself all the time. So I wanted to start a new instrument, and I thought viola seemed like a good option because I'd never really heard about it before. And also, my piano teacher actually wanted me to play an instrument that had a little less commitment than, say, like violin or cello. And yeah, I just fell in love with it because not only would I have to like play by myself, but I also got the chance to play with other people in like orchestras and chamber music. And that became one of my favorite parts of playing an instrument. So yeah, that like carried me through all of middle school, high school. I had so many transformative experiences playing in Seattle Youth Symphony, and also I got the opportunity to attend an arts camp called Interlochen. And all these like opportunities just really made me fall in love with music so much more. So that carried up all the way until when I was looking for colleges and I really wanted to find somewhere where I could continue my love for music. And Yale just ended up being a really great option because of the music school having a lot of resources there. And also, I'm currently a part of the Yale Symphony Orchestra, which is a very rigorous ensemble that is made up of a lot of non music majors. So I'm able to continue pursuing music and interact with a lot of other talented musicians, even though I'm not actually majoring in music. So, yeah.
Absolutely, that's so cool. And also circling back to what you were saying earlier about how your teacher wanted you to start an instrument that kind of had less commitment than the violin or the cello, that was really interesting to me because obviously you are such an incredible and dedicated violist. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about your experiences in youth orchestras and chamber ensembles, and maybe what were some of the most valuable lessons that you gained from those experiences.
Mm. Yeah, I think growing up in youth orchestra like helped me grow a lot because something you have to get through in orchestra, especially when you're young, it's like very important is seeing auditions. And I remember like obviously I grew up with playing piano competitions and having a lot of competitive music aspects of my life, but I think seating auditions were the first time I actually began to really value my playing and really tried to practice a lot to improve and do good in the auditions. Obviously, they weren't always going to go perfectly. There were a lot of nerves associated with seating auditions. So sometimes, like, I didn't get the chair that I wanted, or I like felt like I didn't play as well as I did in practice. And I think this process of going through seating auditions and like constantly having to have my playing be judged by someone was really transformative for me because I really learned that it's not always about where you're sitting in the orchestra that equates to how much you enjoy the playing. It honestly is just like being there and showing up and trying your best. And I think these lessons like really helped me not only in the music world but also like outside of music, like in school and other extracurriculars. There were going to be a lot of like competitive formats and places where I would get judged by others and not really get to decide the results, but sometimes like I wouldn't do as well as I thought and that would be okay. And I think seating auditions were a really big part of how I learned to like come to terms with the fact that not everything was always going to go super well. Other things, I think recording is also a big thing for musicians. And over the years, I've done so many recordings for like festival auditions, youth orchestra auditions, stuff like that. And yeah, I remember at the beginning, I thought it would just be like I would practice a lot, I would record and just send in my best take. But I think every year I would learn there was so much more work put into recordings than just that. Like often I would have to go through like multiple rounds, send them to my teacher, go back and forth, correct small things. And even sometimes I would go a week like practicing a lot, but my recordings would be like worse than the ones I had recorded before. And it would be really frustrating to me because I would think, oh, like obviously more practice meant that I would be playing better, but it wouldn't like occur like that. So, yeah, I think I learned a lot about perseverance and just being really sticking through with the recording process and trying to find a take that had the best representation of my playing. I think that was also a big part of the learning process too.
Absolutely. It's so funny that you're saying this because I actually just had a recording session yesterday, so I definitely relate to everything you just said. And I also wanted to touch on what you were saying earlier about seating auditions, and another component of that is getting the principal position. And I was wondering for you, having those leadership experiences, and also I know you have a lot of other amazing leadership experiences in other areas as well. So I was wondering, what have your music leadership experiences taught you about being an effective or a good leader, and how maybe has that transferred to other parts of your life?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Growing up, I think like in youth orchestra, I never really held a principal position, nor did I really like think that much about what it meant to be sitting in the front and being a leader. I was kind of always in the middle and just like playing my part and not really thinking too much about it. But obviously, I think starting when I was in the junior symphony orchestra, which is like the level underneath the youth orchestra in SISO, is when I became principal for the first time. And I think it was a really big learning curve for me because obviously when I was younger, I was a very timid person. I never really like was the one to speak up or like have questions about bowings or fingerings. I kind of just like followed what everyone else was doing in the section. So as principal for the first time, I was really put in the spotlight and people were counting on me to like communicate with the other sections, get fingerings and bowings, talk to the conductor, and just overall be like a lot more recognized and like a lot more communicative with everyone. Yeah, and obviously at first it was really hard for me. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel like I was good enough to take on these positions, but I think over the course of time, so after being principal in junior orchestra and then moving to youth and just getting to know my section a lot better and also getting to know the principal seat a lot better, I learned to really take on responsibilities and figure out what worked best for a section. And yeah, I think these leadership abilities, so I would like have to talk to other section leaders, talk to the conductor, make sure that my section was playing in the same part of the bow and stuff like that. And I think obviously this would have a lot of relationships with taking on leadership in other aspects of my life because, yeah, like music was something that was really important for me, and learning how to be a leader in music gave me a lot of skills that were transferable to other activities I do, like Model UN and running and all sorts of things in my life. So I'm really grateful that I got the opportunity to train myself and acquire these abilities through being a principal. But yeah, I think I've really grown throughout the role, and I'm really grateful that I was able to do that.
Absolutely. I remember when I was still in SISO and you were in SISO as well, I looked up to you a lot because you seem like such a cool and dependable leader. And I was wondering for our next question if you could talk a little bit about maybe your summer program experience at Interlochen, because a lot of people reference these summer programs as being very transformative and very impactful to their musical growth. And I was wondering, what was it like for you, and maybe what were some of the most valuable things that you learned there?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to mention even before that is the fact that I got to attend a music camp because I think a lot of students, especially students that value their academics a lot, tend to think that like for college apps or for like my future, I don't want to really waste my time during the summer playing music or spending this much time at a music camp when I don't really know necessarily if I want to have a career in music. And I definitely had those same thoughts, and my parents also had those same thoughts. But I'm so glad that I chose to do Interlochen. And I think looking back, my parents also agree, like, they're so glad they sent me there for 7 weeks, basically my entire summer between sophomore and junior years. Just because when you're growing up, like as a high schooler, no one really knows what they want to do. I'm sure people have an idea, but you're never like 100% set on like, oh, I want to have a job in blah, blah, blah. So during this time, it's so important that you pursue what is important to you and what you value in life. Because whether that be like college applications, any applications for like summer programs, anything you do in life, people are looking at what makes you different and what do you value and what are you passionate about and what have you done towards that thing you're passionate about. So The thing I was passionate about was viola and music and being surrounded by music with other people. And Interlochen offered me just that. So it was really great that I was able to spend 7 weeks there. And I ended up having such a great time. I wrote so many essays about Interlochen. People that have asked me about summer programs, I always talk to them about Interlochen just because of how powerful of an experience it was. Yeah, so basically, I attended a 1 week viola intensive where I focused just on viola solo music. And then after the intensive, I participated in the 6 week orchestral program where every week we would have a new conductor, a different set of pieces. And during this whole time, I was also working in the chamber music program. So I played with the quartet, and we played two pieces throughout the entirety of the camp. Yeah, and I think this was the first time that I only thought about music for literally 7 weeks straight. I was always practicing in the rehearsal room, in the chamber music rehearsal room. My friends I was making, the people I was eating meals with, sleeping with, were all so artistically talented. And I think just like having these conversations, being surrounded by the music, just being at Interlochen changed the way I thought about music and the way I like carried myself in music. And at the same time, obviously, I met so many people that were so interesting and so talented that I still talk to this day. And I think these relationships are also something that you can't really find otherwise if you're just going to your regular local youth orchestra or just like going to your school orchestra because these people are like so committed to their instrument and are just as passionate about the things you are. So yeah, I'm so grateful that I got to do Interlochen, and I think anyone that's passionate about music and wants to explore their instrument more should consider a program like that.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with what you're saying about music programs changing the way you carry yourselves because I feel like in addition to the musical growth that you get there, a huge benefit is the confidence that you get, feeling that you can kind of be part of this bigger music community and that you won't be judged, but instead you'll be supported and mentored by so many people. And I was also wondering for you, since you mentioned how music played a big role in your personal passions even before college, and now when you are in college, you are still pursuing music with the Yale Symphony Orchestra. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about this orchestra and maybe how it compares to your time in like SISO and how college music studies compare to your pre-college studies.
hmm It's a really good question to ask me now, actually, because first year I would have said, like, yeah, music is just as big in my life. Last year I was taking lessons, I played chamber music, I was part of the orchestra, I was practicing outside of like all my musical activities. So I would say, like, it had just as big of a role in my life last year as it did all throughout high school. But this year, having like really started to like get into my college studies, really think about my major, what I want to do as a career, which doesn't have a lot to do with music. I think I've kind of put music on the back burner and I've still been part of the orchestra, but I've tried to limit my like playing a lot more, which I think has been really good for me to go through, but also reflect upon because this is the first time in like since third grade that I've not really valued music and playing on my instrument as much as something else. So, yeah, I've learned a lot through this process and I realized how much I missed something like playing in a chamber music group or just like having time to practice on my own and work on my own repertoire. So next semester, I'm making it a goal to reintroduce viola in my life and really play on it a lot more and start new pieces. But yeah, at the same time, being able to be a part of the Yale Symphony Orchestra is something I'm so grateful for because I know a lot of colleges don't have an orchestra, slash, their orchestra is like a lot lower commitment and people aren't necessarily focusing on their instruments. But at Yale Symphony Orchestra, what shocked me the most is how much talent and how much time people were dedicating to their instruments, even if they were majoring in something like CS or they were pre med or they had like no future aspirations in becoming a professional musician, they still chose to take out so much time during their week to go to rehearsal, practice their parts, play chamber music, and just put so much time into music. And being a part of the viola section specifically, I met so many like cool people that are now my like closest friends at school. And it's so cool that we get to be classmates in the classroom, but also I get to see them in the orchestra and play alongside them. And I think it's the same thing in school orchestra in high school, but in college it's just a little different because these people are like people you're seeing in the dining halls, you're spending all your time with, you're maybe studying with, you're getting through so many things with, and they're also your closest partners in the orchestra. Just met so many great people. I've still been able to play so many cool pieces in orchestra, pieces I've never even heard of before. We've collaborated with a bunch of soloists. Last year, we got the opportunity to tour North Macedonia and Greece, which was my first time going on an international tour with an orchestra. So many new things and new musical adventures I'm still exploring, even though I'm not necessarily dedicating as much time into the viola. So, yeah, those are just a few things that I've been grateful for with the YSO that I wasn't necessarily expecting.
I was wondering, since obviously for musicians that get older throughout high school and definitely as they enter college, academics become more and more important and they also become more rigorous, and also other extracurricular activities become more rigorous as well. So I was wondering for you, as such an academic weapon, what are some ways that either you balance music with the other parts of your life? So either like mentally balance, or like you mentioned, there isn't as much time to dedicate on music and balance with the academics. So what are some ways you can practice efficiently or make sure that you get what you want to get done in music and still have time for everything else?
Yeah, I think the reason why I was able to remain so dedicated to music throughout high school, even though there were like obviously a lot of other things happening in my life, and it became easy, I think, to put music on the back burner. And I saw that in a lot of people's lives around me, people that I grew up playing music with. They ended up like finding other things they value more or having to dedicate more time to academics, for example, and kind of just like playing less music than they did when they were younger. I think for me, it's because music never really felt like the same as doing homework or leading a Model UN conference or something that I was like doing because I felt like I had to. It was always just something that I was doing because I loved it so much and I really, truly wanted myself to improve. And I was very invested in the things I was doing with the viola. Even though I would be busy, I would have homework, I would come home and have a lot of other things I could be doing, but every day I would dedicate at least an hour or 2 hours, just focus on the viola, try to not think about anything else, and just think about my playing and how to improve on my playing. And I think this was actually really healthy for me throughout high school because obviously it got stressful. I got stressed, things happened, and I would just use viola as a way to sort of distract myself from all the stressful things that were happening in my life. And as soon as I entered this room that I practiced viola in, my brain would just like stop thinking about other things and I would just think about the sounds that I was producing with my instrument, how I wanted myself to sound and how I could get myself there. So yeah, I think this offered a really great balance between like academics, social things, other activities I was involved in, and music. For people, I think that end up finding things that they value more than music, I think that's like fine too. Like I know music is not everyone's like number one passion, but I think like the act of playing music and being with other people is such a healthy like healing process that it's good to keep that in your life no matter like how much you value it or don't value it. So I guess I encourage people that do play an instrument and have musical talents to just try to keep it in their life in some way, whether it be like being a part of your local orchestra, just finding time to like practice occasionally, because I think it's such a healthy thing to have music in your life and being able to have something you're thinking about that's not just the stressful parts of your life necessarily.
That's really inspiring because I feel like for a lot of musicians, music is definitely more of a stressor than it is a stress reliever. And I think for my experience, especially in my younger years, that was definitely true. And it's really refreshing to hear what you're saying. And I think that's inspired me a lot to appreciate my music journey more. And I also wanted to talk a bit about your practice habits and techniques because I feel like the entire practice process of having to fix so many little details and having so many things to think about all the time is what kind of makes the process of learning an instrument tedious and difficult for a lot of people. So I was wondering for you, since you're so passionate and since you mentioned enjoying your practice time so much, I was wondering what your practice sessions look like, really. How did you structure them? Maybe how did you practice certain techniques so that you didn't burn out or get kind of stuck in the tedious cycle of practicing that make a lot of people not continue their music studies?
I think for me, why I was able to maintain such a healthy relationship with music, and then I'll get into the practice part, is because I was never really forced by anyone to practice, or my parents were like obviously invested in how I did in music, but they weren't like, oh, like you have to practice this much, we expect you to win this and that, you have to enter in this. All of my like things I chose to do with music and how much time I dedicated to music was all sort of based on what I wanted for myself and my own investment in my improvement. I think because I had so much agency over my musical journey and how much time and effort I dedicated, it never became a chore for me, and I always felt like it was freeing because it was one of like few things that I had like complete self-control over. And practice techniques, that was definitely a work in progress. I think I'm still not like a perfect practicer. Like there are a lot of ways in which can become more efficient. But I think, yeah, I would improve over what my teacher was giving me as feedback. I remember back in the pandemic, I really tried to hone in on how to become an efficient practicer and what sorts of things I could do to really improve every day rather than just like getting through all my material and playing it over and over again. So, I mean, I've tried a bunch of different things. I think one thing that I did, I don't know if it helped, but it definitely was a transformative part of the process, was taking notes every day. I know that's not very sustainable if you're busy, but I did this over the pandemic. I would take notes on what I wanted to get through that day, how much time I wanted to spend on every single thing. So, like etudes, scales, Bach, my concerto, another piece. And yeah, every day I would just look at what I wrote down. And I think this really gave my practice structure because I was going through like a list and I had a specific amount of time and energy I wanted to dedicate to every part of my playing. And yeah, I would write this every day, so it allowed me to reflect on what went well in practice the previous day and what I wanted to change for the next day. I didn't do this every single year, but I think even doing this for like 1 or 2 years back when it was the pandemic really allowed me to think a lot about what I was doing when I was practicing rather than just like playing the notes and making sure I was in tune. Another thing I did that actually was recommended to me by my teacher, and I'm sure a lot of people also do this. I know my professional musician friends also do this, is recording yourself. I know it's all always really hard because you have to turn on the recording thing, play through your entire like excerpt, and then go back and listen. And people I know hate listening to themselves, but you kind of just have to get through it and yeah, really record yourself a lot because I think it puts on a different lens on your playing and you really get to listen to the notes you're producing and how they sound. So yeah, that's how I improved a lot too, is by recording and listening to myself. Yeah, and I think even if you had limited time, just even picking up your instrument every day and like doing vibrato exercises or playing a couple scales is better than just leaving it to the next day because I think it's more just the habit of like playing your instrument every day that creates this good cycle of like practice and improvement.
Definitely. I feel like recently, since I mentioned I just had a recording session yesterday, I was recording myself a lot at home as well. And I feel like that's definitely really valuable. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And I was wondering, maybe shifting gears a little bit, if we could talk about performances. I still remember going to your senior recital and your incredible concerto performance. I was stunned. It was so good. Obviously, solo performances can be very nerve-wracking, and you also mentioned having competition experience with piano and being in that competitive environment ever since you were younger. So I was wondering, how do you kind of manage that performance or competition stress anxiety and put on a performance that you're proud of on stage?
I think, as I was talking about earlier, I grew up doing music competitions. I think for me, I really treated them as an opportunity to practice performance and being confident in front of a crowd. And I've had to do things in front of a crowd in many other activities that I've done in my life. So I think this is just another way for me to practice like being confident in front of other people. Something my teacher taught me was really good was this idea of even when you're competing or when you're going to a competition or playing this like really important recital, just think of like you're trying to put on a performance for the audience. Like it's not about getting all the right notes or playing as perfectly as you did that one time in practice. It's just about thinking about what do I want to say with this piece that I'm playing today? What do I want the audience to feel? And how am I going to play to get the audience to feel that and really transfer my emotions into the audience? And I think this put a different lens on the way I was treating competitions and auditions and recording and performance. Every time I was like doing one of these like, musical things, I was just thinking about what is a message I want to send to the person that will be listening to me with this piece and how am I going to get them to feel that? So I would care less about the notes and like getting everything correctly, but more about the greater like phrases in the music and communicating and trying to put in more dynamics and be a more expressive player. And obviously, this made me sound better, but also took the stress away from performing. And when I would step up onto the stage, it wouldn't be about, oh, I have to nail every note and get everything right and be in tune and in tempo. It would be about, okay, I really want the audience to feel the sort of love and longing and nostalgia that is associated with the Walton Viola Concerto. And that's how I'm going to play it today. I guess I just want to talk about the viola more specifically because I know you've had like a lot of different types of musicians that have worked on different things on your podcast. And I know a lot of people, especially like orchestral musicians, have a lot of thoughts about the viola and viola players. And obviously, I've heard like different opinions through the years. But the reason why I love the viola so much, and I'm so glad that I chose it, even though it isn't necessarily like the instrument where you get a lot of solos or you're always being noticed, or some people think like, oh, like, does playing viola even help you? Because it, like, not a lot of people play it and it's not a very, like, shining extracurricular to have. But I think what I learned so much from playing the viola that I don't know if you necessarily learn from playing another instrument is the aspect of like listening and being this mediator in the orchestra. Because in an orchestra, you have the violin who is always like almost always like spotlight of the moment. The cellos are also like pretty noticed by everyone. They're the one of the lowest string like sections and they have a lot of like solos as well, but also like yeah, they serve a very foundational purpose in the orchestra. So the viola is often unnoticed, but I think what I learned the most about being a viola player was just listening to everyone else in the orchestra. We would sometimes be supporting the violin, sometimes we would be echoing the cellos, sometimes we would be like paired with a random section in the woodwind section. It would be all the time in rehearsal, the conductor would be like, okay, viola, is this part you're with the bassoons, or this part you have to listen to what the second violins are playing. So we would always be like kind of hopping around in our roles in the orchestra. And I think this really taught me when I was in an orchestra to really listen to everything around me and notice all the voices and what was being passed around and try to replicate that in my own playing. And I think it gave me a really great like alternative to my solo playing because I would be thinking a lot about my own playing and the sound I was producing and what I wanted myself to sound like. But then in orchestra, I would be doing a lot of listening and replicating and trying to fit in instead of just like caring about my own sound. So I think this is one thing that I learned about being a viola player specifically that I didn't necessarily think that would be a trait you could learn as another instrumentalist. And also, I think I just grew in confidence a lot over the years because obviously I would be like, oh my gosh, violas are not always in tune. I would hear that all the time. And like, people be like, it's not that important. But I think I learned to really become confident in the viola and my part in the orchestra, in chamber groups, as a solo player, because I realized and people would tell me just how important violas were in the orchestra and in chamber music, despite us being like having all these stereotypes behind our backs. I think growing as a viola player and growing beyond these stereotypes really taught me a lot about music and what it meant to be a valued musician.
That's such a valuable perspective, and I'm sure a lot of musicians would benefit from hearing that. So now moving into closing thoughts, I was wondering to wrap up this episode, do you have maybe a final message or a word of advice that you wish more people knew or you want to send to our listeners?
I think this echoes a lot of what I said earlier, but music is such a special thing. I've never gotten closer to people as I have in music, like compared to any other activity. I think there's such a unique thing about sharing music with someone and being able to collaborate musically with someone. Because I think it puts you in such an intimate space where you're putting so much of your emotion into your instrument and communicating with other people that these are some of the people that you will be the closest to in your life. And I think that's a really unique thing. And I really want people to learn to value it because music is not just about like, oh, I have to nail this audition, get this certain chair, win certain prizes, play a certain way, make someone proud a certain way. It's really just about what the connections that you're making through it, what it brings into your life, and it really offers a balance between your other things that you might be pursuing and music. And I really want people to, I guess, remember that when they might be getting stressed for like a certain recording session or a certain audition, or they might be feeling pressure from being compared to like other musicians in their life. I think at the end of the day, music is really just about these intimate connections you're forming with other people and all these emotions that you're able to put into your instrument that you can't necessarily express just by like talking to someone or sharing something verbally. So yeah, I think just valuing that and just keeping in mind that that's what music is about. I really want people to remember that.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much, Amanda. This is really insightful and really inspiring for me to listen to, and I'm sure it'll be for everyone listening as well. And thank you so much to everyone else for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please look forward to the next one, which will be released next week.